right, my name is Dušan Vukčevič. I'm a 3D artist, obviously. I've been in the 3D business for over 15 years, and I work as a freelancer from a tiny little village in Slovenia. It's in the middle of the forest, in the middle of nowhere, really. That's not my house, by the way, but I wish it was. So, I'm going to make this part workshop. I'm going to show you some project, and part I'm going to talk a bit about other stuff, how I got into 3D from animation and stuff like that. So, I do all kinds of 3D work, but what I really enjoy doing is architectural visualizations. So, let me show you my arch-viz demo reel. That's it. Thank you very much. Thanks. Thank you. So, all the stuff you've seen here is my personal projects. As you see, I've done quite a few, and everywhere I go, I always talk about personal projects, because I really think they really changed, not my career, but my life, really, because I've been doing those, started learning from them, and I just kept doing that, and I just can't stop learning. So I always encourage everybody to do personal projects, no matter what you do. You just, start something and try to use a new tool, new technique, something, and do that over time, and you can really see huge progress in your career. So I really enjoy doing those. Even though I'm very busy with projects, I try to find at least 1 hour a day to do something for myself. It really motivates me and keeps me focused and, enjoy doing what I'm doing. A client job can be a bit, stressful and sometimes repetitive. So, you learn a lot with client jobs, right? But doing your own project, having 100% control of what you do, it's totally different. And those personal projects got me really nice awards and publications in popular magazines. So that kind of brought me new clients, new jobs. So it's just plus and no minuses, really. Just the time is always an issue. So I want to go back. I'm going to quickly go back and explain how I got into all this. So, yeah, that's me a couple of years ago. Actually, it's a very long time ago. So I was always I was a computer geek, trying to, always trying to learn new stuff, figure things out, and actually, many years later, nothing has changed. I still figure things out, learning things. Even my hair looks the same, so nothing changed, really. So I knew I would do something with computers, didn't know what. I would eventually figure it out. So for some stupid reason, I went to economics school and finished it. I have a degree in economics and got a job working with computers. So dream come true, right? No, I worked in an accounting section and punching in numbers all day. So yeah, I need to update my goals. So in my free time, I was looking over some programs and came across Fireworks from Macromedia. Anybody knows that? It's similar to Photoshop. So I was editing photos, designing stuff, and I noticed how I lost track of time when I was doing something creative. So I really enjoyed doing that. So I decided I want to do something like this in life, but easier said than done. I live in the middle of nowhere, right? So actually, I got into design or 3D or 2D world through music. Me and my friends, we have a band for over 20 years. We play happy holiday, Christmas songs, you know, happy songs like that. I'm kidding. We played death metal. So actually, our guitar player told me he worked at a TV station, so I asked him, you know, can I get in? His name is Rock. It's the guy wearing black. So he said no, and I'm not sure. So I tried and I tried. It took me forever. I got that job on a TV station. So I finally kind of was doing what I liked, and I got into animation. It was in After Effects, and I really liked animation. Really liked it. But something strange happened. Every time I would open a new composition, I always used Z-depth. Like I always want to do something 3D. After Effects is 2.5D, so you can do a lot. So I started exploring more. Found a plugin called 3D Invigorator, so you could do some basic 3D, and I kind of liked it. But you know, it's a question time when I would start using a 3D program. And the first one I used was 3ds Max. And for me, it was very hard to get into it. At the time, there were not many tutorials, not many resources. So, so it took me forever to figure things out. But I saw the power of 3D. I saw what you can do. It's like limitless. So I decided to push forward. I learned to use it for TV production. And I was very slow. Even title sequences, logo animations, it just took me forever. Some simple text animation, keyframing, everything. So I started exploring some more and came across this. So I've heard of Cinema 4D. Yes, heard of it before. But broadcast, I was like, wait a minute, that's what I'm doing, broadcast. I'm gonna check it out. So, and that's when first time I saw the mighty MoGraph. And I was like, the things you could do with a couple of clicks, with no keyframes, just it was mind-blowing for me. I just wanted to try it. And when I opened Cinema 4D, everything kind of made sense. Everything was where I expected it to be. Like, everything I tried to do was so simple, I just figured it out without stressing out too much, and actually 3D became very fun for me. And I was able to produce a lot of content. I was able to come up with ideas really quickly, just throwing in effectors into MoGraph and just generated new ideas, and I really enjoyed doing it. So I wanted to do more stuff. I wanted to see the community, reach out to other people. Came across this competition. It was called 99 Frames. I'm gonna show you this because it's very important in my career. So the only rule in the competition was it had to be 99 frames long. So this is what I came up with. Yeah, that's it. So this little animation got me 3rd place, and artists were competing from all over the world. So that was a big deal for me. Just starting out with 3D and already getting awards. And that really motivated me, and people started reaching out to me. I met a lot of people online, and also some clients wanted to work with me. So I started thinking maybe I could do something else, not just broadcast stuff. So I found a studio, Visualis, in in Slovenia. I worked there for a couple of years, and after that, I started freelancing. Started my company, and I'm freelancing now for over 5 years, and I really enjoy it. I kind of like working from home in my space, in my quiet. So, but working with clients from all over the world. So thank goodness we got internet, right? So when working with different projects, I kind of realized that everything I do, I want to make it look kind of realistic for some reason. Whatever I do, it's animation, visualization, whatever. I like it to look realistic. So when I look at the whole industry, kind of architectural visualizations, you have most realistic stuff, right? So I started doing some of that and quickly fell in love with interior design and architecture. So this became my primary focus, and I really tried to do as many as possible. So this photorealism thing that I've been chasing all the time, and I'm still chasing, it just kind of, it's a fun thing. It's a fun thing to do. I was always fascinated by the fact that you can replicate real life in a computer program. So, and then there's always two sides. I see you can create quite quickly a realistic image, right? It used to be difficult, but not anymore. You now have a lot of renders, and you can achieve realistic results with all of them. Some of them faster, some of them slower. You get realistic results with unbiased renders. So this kind of is still a challenge, but not that much anymore. So for me, it's lately it's been more of a creating an interesting image, maybe artistic image, not so technically perfect. You have to know, I mean, if you're a 3D artist, I think you should be a photographer as well, because you have to know the technical aspects of camera, lenses, but it's important that you know how to work with composition, colors, and make a harmony and a balance in the image. That's very important. And for me, when I look at photos, when I look at renderings, it's always, I have to get some sort of emotion when I look at an image. So this is something I try to achieve all the time. When you look at the rendering, that you kind of feel something. You have some kind of emotion, and not just simple image that gives you nothing. So this is the hard part, actually. This is the difficult part, and this is not going to change no matter how technology evolves. So this is worth investing in. When I started in cinema, not many artists were using it for architectural visualization, but more and more each year, more and more artists are getting into arch-viz with Cinema 4D, which is a good thing, because more and more plugins are being developed, more and more resources, so it's a good time to be an architectural visualizer using Cinema 4D, and it's only going to get better, I'm sure of that. I'm not very much technical guy. I'm more like doing artistic stuff, but you have to know some stuff. Otherwise, you're always asking people for advices. You know, it's like, so I use CPU and GPU renderers, CPU renderers for stills, and GPU for animations, because at least on my machine, they're faster. And I used to use all kinds of render engines, but now I'm kind of focused on Octane Render, which I do a lot of animations. And when I have some complex animations that need a lot of control, I use Redshift, because you have really a lot of control, because it's biased, so you don't have to follow the physical rules. It doesn't follow that much, so you can really do a lot of stuff without a lot of trouble, really. And lately, I've been using ProRender that comes with Cinema 4D since release 19. It is very, very good. I'm still digging into it, and the quality, I really like the quality. And it's a CPU, GPU hybrid. So, and the CPU I used, CPU renderer, is Corona. It's CPU, but it's still very fast, and I really like the quality, so I like to use it for stills. Okay, so I'm gonna show you some of the stuff I do real quickly, because if I would do everything right here on this laptop, it would take forever. So I pre-recorded some stuff, and I'm gonna show you some stuff with the computer, but also show you some videos that I recorded at home. So this is the project I want to show you first. It's a project from Dušan Vukčevič. She's a very talented architect from Slovenia, and she came across this nice house design and wanted some portfolio renders, and I was more than happy to do it because I really like the house. So I'm gonna have a seat now. Okay, much better. So this is what we came up with. Some of the different shots, different camera angles, different lighting effects, sunny scene, night scene, some volumetric effects. I even did a little animation here. So it's a CPU, but you can still render the animation. Corona has a nice built-in denoiser, so that works very well. So we both learned a lot from the project, really, because when I started doing everything on my own, and later, a couple of years later, I figured out that it's very good to reach out to other people and try to learn from them, as well as they learn from you. So collaborating on different projects is very good. Either it's an architect, 3D artist, or a sound designer. It doesn't matter. You know, this collaboration is really good. So personal projects sounds like you're personal and you're doing it for yourself, but you know, in reality, you should reach out to as many people as possible. Okay, so let me switch over to Cinema 4D. All right, so this is what I got from Sanja, a CAD model, right? So in architectural visualization, you most of the time get files like this, and they're okay, but you know, you come to the edge of this, and you can see the edges are not beveled out, and there's always lacking some details. So what I'm going to switch to now is So this is the model I edited a bit. I added some panels here, as you see. And what I like to do is use MoGraph as much as possible. So I used MoGraph to do these panels here, and I used random effector to randomize it a bit. So I never use straight lines, never use anything should be straight. Like architects want everything straight, but I cheat on them. They don't notice it, but there's like slight little deformations, and they really help with the realism, because in real life nothing is perfectly straight. And I'm using the random effector for that. So once you got the house, you're supposed to make some kind of a terrain. So what I do is just drop a plane here. Okay, so I want to do some imperfections to the terrain, right? You can't have a straight surface. Let's increase the subdivisions here, convert it to polygon, and what I do is go to sculpting. Here we are, and subdivide, and I do some deformations to the terrain. I use a mask to mask out the area where the house is, so you don't mess that up. I'm not going to do that now. Just use some simple stuff like this, and let's call this done. I'm not going to waste time on this. You get it. Standard. I'm going to convert this quickly to current state to object, so I get rid of the tag. Let's call this terrain. Right. Okay, so next step, usually you have to place some kind of trees around the scene and grass. So I've been using a lot of scattering tools, plugins, and I struggled a lot with those because some of them work really well, some of them not so much. And now, since release 20, I have found a good solution that works really well. It's called multi-instance. And I'm really happy we finally got this. So let's go to MoGraph cloner. And just for the sake of presentation, I'm just going to drop in a cube, something like this, drop this inside of a cloner, set it to, this is the new feature here. Set it to object, drop the terrain inside it. Back to object. Okay, so this is like same as before. Increasing this number a lot works, but kind of slow down the viewport. So what I had to do was change the view to some cube, or it just seemed to slow down the viewport. But now this new feature called multi-instance. And now you have new options here. I usually use points. Okay, so now all the clones are being represented as points, and now I can just go on and... This is a very old laptop, but just see that, it works. And I'm rotating just fine, it's no problem. Nice visual representation of where the clones are. So it's a really nice way to work. Here's a new project that is already done. So that's basically how I do it. So I have a grass model, right? And I got a cloner, and I used random effector to rotate. Oh, okay. To rotate the grass. So let's hit render, because okay, so usually using the scattering tools, right? There was a long preparation time. You had many clones. It took forever to compile everything and start rendering. Well, with multi-instance, this is actually very good. So there's a lot of clones here, and now we're preparing the scene. This is the process that takes a lot of time, and it's really painful to do. And here, again, on this laptop, it's already calculating. And there we go, it's rendering already. So I really like a multi-instance, and I always use it unless I use Octane render, because Octane has a nice scattering tool called Octane Scatter, and I'm going to quickly play this video. I pre-recorded this, so I dropped in an Octane Scatter, drop in the grass, similar as before, drop in the terrain, and already works. And you also have a nice presentation of the grass, and I'm just doing some slight rotations and deformations, so it's not perfect, and it just works. And even the viewport works very well, and the Octane is following very, very quickly. So it's a very nice way to work. So when using Octane, I'm using Octane Scatter. All other engines, I use multi-instance, right? So the next thing, this is one of the shots for the projects, the trees. And I'm going to go back to cinema. So sometimes you can't just scatter trees around. You want to create some kind of a composition. So you need to place trees by hand. And what I usually do is I go to tags and select constraint tag, which is under character, and I go to clamp and drop in the landscape. What this does is it clamps the trees or objects to your surface. So I'm moving this around, these objects, and they're sticking to this terrain here. So this is a nice way to move around trees and do clones, and you don't have to worry about if they're sticking in the ground or floating in the air. All right. The trees I used for this project are from Evermotion. They're very high quality. I like them a lot. Otherwise, I use Forester. It's a plugin for Cinema 4D. It works really well. You can create trees from scratch. You can animate the growth. You can add wind simulations and all kind of stuff. You have a nice library of trees, grass, and a bunch of stuff. So very useful. So here's an example of simulation. Just a couple of clicks, and you already have a nice pre-made wind. And here's the library of a lot of different files, and trees and rocks and grass and plants. Here's a little example I did. Just a slight little wind in the grass. Adds kind of more realistic feel. This is one of my projects. I re-rendered, added some trees inside, and applied this wind effect to it. So it's we're kind of used to seeing the leaves move, so it feels more natural doing it this way. And it's very fast also. It doesn't take a lot of computing. Okay, let's talk about lighting. So the way I see it is you create a good model, right? And you create a good material. And that together makes a realistic image. The lighting, I believe, is just creating a mood, creating a nice looking image, and not necessarily realistic. So if you have a nice, like for this instance, why am I using mouse? This mouse, you model it very nicely. You have a nice shader, right? It doesn't matter what kind of light. You can use a flashlight. It's going to look realistic, right? But it's probably not going to look nice. So the lighting is all about creating an atmosphere, nice looking effect. So usually my lighting is very simple. For instance, this here is basic Corona sky, and it already looks pretty good, like almost like the final result. So just simple sky. What I used was an HDR, and this is done with HDR. Sorry for the noisy image. So the difference is like really minimum, okay? And I also used some IES lights. So lights in the interior, and I like to use IES lights. You just drop in IES file into the IES slot. IES lights contain photometric data, which means they have information that real life light has. So they really add more details than simple area lights or other simple lights. So altogether, see, just simple lighting. Not much else to say, really. The render settings, I'm not even going to talk about render settings because I didn't touch anything, really. Octane and Corona in this case, just, usually by default in Octane I go path tracing, set the samples. In Corona, I basically do nothing, just render until it looks good enough and stop. So I like that. I used to do a lot of technical stuff. I really got deep into renderings and photons and all the stuff. But right now, I just don't feel like doing that anymore. So I just focus on artistic stuff and let the programs do their stuff. So the HDR I used is from CG Source. Very important, high quality HDRs. If they're low poly, or some of them are free online, they look kind of good, but they have to really have a lot of depth. So it's taken with a lot of different exposures. Then you see the difference in the end result. So next thing I want to talk about, you can see a bit of a fog in the background, and this is again creating some kind of atmosphere. So the way I did this is I created a simple cube which will contain this fog, okay? And I created a volume material and just basically changed the parameters a bit to make it look good. So this I'm moving the cube around, so the area where the cube is going to be where the fog is going to start. It's going to have a nice fall off into the distance. So here's a little example. So this is without the fog. It looks not so good. You can even see the HDR in the background, right? So I was trying to create a whole hill with trees, but then I added some fog, and that HDR actually kind of looked good. So I just left it the way it is. So you can play around with some parameters. If you change the distance of absorption, you can create a really dark-looking image, like this. You know, artistic stuff. Also, you can change the color and create some different moods. So it works very fast and it's very, very efficient. So, all right, the next lighting is sunlight. I used Corona Sun and Corona Sky, which work quite fast, but usually I light all my scenes with HDRs. So again, high quality HDR, so this is with HDR, this is with sun. You get a different result, but in reality, it's pretty much the same. I'm going to talk a bit more about lighting later. So materials, this part is very important. You get the materials right, you're going to have a nice image, almost certainly. So the way I go about creating textures is I like taking pictures of them and edit them in Photoshop. Use them in my projects, create bump, normal, displacement, maps, everything. I use Substance Designer to create materials from scratch, or I buy textures online. I like scan textures a lot lately. This is real displacement textures, high quality stuff. So there's many more. So using those, it really helps you to get nice looking images with little effort. Here's a little example of material creation. I did this material on the metal plates on the building. So Corona now has a node-based system like Cinema 4D and R20. This one is not as advanced, but it works quite well. So first thing I do is tick on the channels I need. It's reflection, bump, and displacement. So next thing I do is drop in some textures. It's a simple metal texture and some random bump texture. So I'm going to quickly go forward. Okay, so I'm connecting the metal texture into diffuse, and I'm connecting some random material for the reflection and for the bump. So I almost never use the same image for bump and texture unless it's like a wood texture that you really need. So you always have to have some reference images and try to not. In reality, we always think we know how some material looks, but we usually, at least I am always wrong. So I always look for images, find them online or take pictures or something. It's ideal if you actually have a thing in your hand and you can really see all the details, how they work. So this looked a bit too bright, so I use a Corona color correction to make it a bit darker. I'm moving forward, so all the surfaces, all the big surfaces, I always use a bit of displacement. You almost don't see it sometimes, but it's there. So like a big plane somewhere or a huge architectural glass, right? I add displacement in there. It's a little deformation, and it picks up reflection so much better, and it adds a really realistic result. And if you use plane for glass, and you use another one and push it back and change the displacement a bit, so you get a double glass with different reflections, and it adds so much to the realistic look. Because if you just add a plane, simple plane with no displacement, it's just going to pick up a reflection from somewhere, like you placed a picture on the glass. It doesn't look right. So in reality, glass is never super perfectly straight. You know, this only tiny little bit, and that's actually what adds the different refraction. So I just used a simple noise and dropped it inside of the displacement, and there we go. It looks much different, like a lot different, and the effect is very minimal. Okay, so basically that's it. I just want to do some imperfections. If clients allow you that, I love doing that, because you never really get perfect materials. There's always some worn out edges. If it's new, maybe, but you know, it just usually it looks better if you have a feeling like it's been weathered a bit or been damaged a little bit. So I used Corona ambient occlusion. I use just white material here, just for the better demonstration. And I use inner edge and outer edge. So you know how ambient occlusion works. It finds the edges in the model and places this texture on those areas. So this is what it looks like with ambient occlusion. Obviously, you never see that perfect ambient occlusion unless you really do it by hand, and even then it's not perfect. So you want to break that with some kind of a grunge map. I already have it here. So when I connect it, you can see the difference is huge, like perfect ambient occlusion and noise, or grunge map. And when we look from distance, this is basically it. Just a tiny little detail. And usually it's all about the details. The plants, the leaves, it's quite simple, just a material with reflections and some bump. And what I do is use the bitmap I use for diffuse, for translucency, and you immediately get the translucent effect. And I use some color correction to enhance this effect. This is obviously too much, this is too little. You play around with the fraction here. It's, again, eyeballing is not really good. You need photos of like leaves in the sun, and you're going to be much easier to create a good-looking image. This is Corona light mix. So you use all the lights, drop them inside of a multipass, and you can play around all you want. You can turn off and on the lights, change day settings to day scene to night scene with a couple of clicks, change the power, change the color. Very useful. And you can do that while you're rendering, so it really saves a lot of time. Definitely try that. By the way, Corona is still in the beta stage, so it's free for download. You can try it whenever you like. No matter what render engine I use, I always render out multipass. Even though I'm happy with the result I got in cinema, right? I still want to do multipass just in case I need something. So I need like a little bit of reflection here, so I have to tweak it in post, and you know it's a hassle to do it. But if you have a reflection pass, you just use it. So, for instance, this is just a raw render. Then I use some direct lighting, so a little bit of difference. Then some indirect lighting. So this is the lighting that's not being from HDR. Just you can see in the background a little change, right? Like a diffuse light. Some reflection. It's not much. You can see it, right? And some refraction on the glass behind. So it's a subtle detail, but you know you could achieve all those things in post. But I like having the control of the multipass. Okay, that's it for the exterior. I want to talk a bit about interior rendering and with Octane Render. And I want to talk something about in general that I do. Not so much lately, but I used to cheat a lot. I'm going to admit it. So I see it like a physical way to do it and cheating. Okay, so let's talk about cheating first. Okay, this is the scene, and this is the rendering, and I'm going to just zoom out of the scene, okay? So here we go. Whoa, and nothing there. So just a couple of planes, all right? See, nothing. It's embarrassing. Couple of area lights and image for the building in the back. So yeah, if you can get away with it, it's great. There's one great thing about this. And why would you even do that? Well, first, you don't have to build the entire scene. Second, the light bounces that are coming into the room, it requires less light bounces. So the scene gets illuminated much quicker because it's open, right? So it renders much faster. You can't get away with this if you're doing a 360 image or you have multiple cameras. Here's an example. I did a VR image 360. So the whole scene is built, right? And you can already see that it takes longer to render because you have a small opening, and there it needs a lot of light bounces to bounce around the room to light it up, so you have enough lightness. So that takes time. But result, I think, is also very good because by default you get realistic looking image. If you're cheating, you're going to get a lot of weird stuff, and you have to be careful where you place the lights. So sometimes it's I see like guys remove the background so it renders faster behind the camera, right? And it renders faster, but something is off. It just doesn't look right. Shadows are messed up, and so you have to be really careful how you cheat, so you don't get caught. Right, another example here. This is a pretty old project, and if you look at the shadows, you get the illusion. There's like bunch of stuff outside, right? You see the shadows, all the details. So you kind of think that I did like a whole exterior and then I rendered the interior, but in reality, I just added some floating trees, nothing else. Simple as that. You can see this pattern on like a window pattern and floating white trees, nothing else. But it's the end result that counts. But again, if I would have to show the exterior as well, you can't get away with this. I'm not going to dive into materials with Octane right now, but the process pretty much simple with all node-based materials. What I want to say here is you have to use high-quality textures. Very high quality textures. Like I'm zooming in here, and I'm really getting close. Pick a focus point, and you can still see the detail is there. So this texture is 7K, 5K are good, 3K are still kind of okay, but less than that, I never used anything. Even though if it's like an object in the background, I like to have that as sharp as possible. So you have a very simple material. Not much happening, but it looks good because the texture is good. Simple as that. Here's a little test render for metal. It just, you can go with the node tree. You can really go crazy, but in reality, it's quite simple. So I really like using node editors because you use two materials, blend them together with a mask, and use another material, blend that together. You can go on for days, really. And you can always go back, and everything kind of makes sense because even you can change just one texture, and the whole node tree gets updated. So that's I really like working with nodes. And for instance, for metals, the more complex you make them, the better they look because metals are pretty complex. So here's another scene of mine. I kind of don't like using sun, like Octane Sun in this case. I use it in this case, but almost never. I always like to use HDRs. So here's a render with the sun, and later I dropped in an HDR. And for me, it just kind of looks better with HDRs. And so usually when you have an HDR with sunny HDR, so you have skies and the sun, and everything gets white, right? You don't see the sun. You don't see the sun unless you turn on the sun, Octane Sun, unless you do this. So this used to be a blue sky image, right? HDR. So what I did, I toned down everything except for the sun. So only the sun gives the most lighting, and everything else then comes into play. So you have to increase the exposure so the sky comes into the scene, but then the sun is so dominant that you get a feeling like you added the sun in the scene. So this is a very useful technique, and you can use any HDR and just use it in Photoshop, lower the exposure, use a mask, and just keep the sunlight on. And this is going to give you a nice result. Yeah. Yeah, that's basically my workflow for interiors and exteriors, and there's really not much else because it's a lot of artistic stuff, to be honest. to get a nice composition, to get colors, to get, like you have an interior and you have a camera, right? Like an amateur comes in and takes a picture, and then a pro comes in with the same camera, same lighting, same everything, he takes a picture. And it's a huge difference, right? It's same with the tools. So you have to really practice all this artistic stuff and photographic stuff to get nice feeling for lighting, because the technical stuff is really something that gets easier every day. So really focus on that. Yeah, so I really spend a lot of time on this stuff. I really work a lot, and but it's important. I made the mistake quite often. It's important that you also take a break, relax a bit, because you can burn out or like really start to hate all this stuff. So you need some time off, do whatever. For me, it's my family and it's music. All right, I just had to show this. What I also like to do is go out and meet other artists and people, and so I like to speak on conferences. I like to do workshops, and I teach in universities and college and in high schools occasionally. So I have some tutorials on Patreon. So I really learned a lot from other artists, a lot. So I always try to find a way to give back to the community. So this is kind of my way of doing it. I have some resources on my website. I'm all over social media at Voodoo Motion. So anybody has any questions, whatever, feel free to reach out. I'll try to help if I know how to. So I'm not sure if we have some time. I'm more than happy to answer any questions or whatever, but thank you so much for listening. My name is Dušan Vukčevič. Thanks. I think we do have time. Any questions? Nobody's... Yeah. I tried Arnold, but I don't use it much. I like I said, Octane render, Pro Render, Redshift, Corona, V-Ray. Yes, the difference is speed. I like Arnold, it's very high quality render, but it's not as fast as Octane if you have many GPUs, many graphics cards. So that also depends on the hardware you have. So it's not really like I said. It just depends. If you have many graphics cards, you're going to be faster with GPU. If you have good CPU, you're going to be faster with CPU. So it depends on what kind of machine you have. Yeah, you know. That's a good question. It's a good question. When I have a project, exterior, interior, I use just one renderer engine, and depends on what kind of project it is. But what I noticed is Octane. I love working Octane with close, small scenes. Like for instance, I'm creating this. Octane is perfect, absolutely perfect. But when I'm creating exteriors, like a large scene, it's great. But it takes me a lot of more tweaking to make it look right for some reason. With Corona, it's just you turn on the sun and click render, and it kind of looks more natural to me for some reason. But with Corona, when I'm doing details, I struggle a lot more. For the depth of field and everything, Octane feels more natural when it comes to that. So that's just the way I see it. And this is basically just examples I did. So it's not like I'm doing this all the time. So I'm mixing all the stuff. But yeah, that's a good question. Yeah. But you can really achieve anything with any renderer. It just, it's how you can use it. Obviously, I can't do everything like that. So sometimes, even I decide to use a certain renderer, not because I think I could make a better job, but you really limit it with time. So I choose, for instance, Octane or Redshift because I really have to render this very quickly. I don't have time to clean all the samples with maybe a CPU renderer. So That's also why I decide. Or maybe I have like a project like this. I can take my time. It's not in a hurry. So I'm going to choose a CPU. So I want to learn more about it, this renderer. So, this is how I decide. Any more questions? Just let him. Yeah, go ahead. Thank you.
It's always nice to see such a result. But one thing is the composition you said, and the other thing, and the render, for example. But the other thing is the color correction, all the stuff which comes behind. You showed it with Photoshop pictures. How do you get? I mean, you have 50 years of experience, you said, but how do you do your color correction? Because in my opinion, this is quite the most important thing.
For me, it used to be very important, but not anymore because I don't do very much. No, there's So there's one thing I like to do is use lookup tables. Okay. So the problem is when I render out an image, and then I go into post, and then I see stuff that I could do different because it doesn't work out. So I maybe have to re-render something. So what I like to do is take a rough rendering and put it in a Photoshop and tweak the settings I like and create a custom lookup table and load it into the renderer. So now when I'm rendering, I already have a post-production in there. So I know what I'm doing already. So I don't have to worry, okay, how it's going to look when I increase exposure, what parts are going to be good, what parts are not going to be good. So I like to have the post-production already while I'm working. Sometimes I use even some presets, but almost never. I really like my own lookup tables. And I think it saves you time. Also, like for instance, I render out this image, and I have everything in 3D with a lookup table, and render it, and just save it out and send it to the client. And he says, move the camera a little to the left, right? Okay, so move the camera, re-render, and send it in like 15 minutes. If I have a huge composition in Photoshop and a bunch of stuff, masks, and everything, just a couple of centimeters of the camera to the left, it's all messed up. You're done. You can't move the masks. You're done. You have to do everything again. So this is what I hate doing. I don't like masking things up. So I try to do everything in 3D, and you don't mind the corrections from the client. Yeah, it used to be a bigger issue, but when I'm for instance, when I'm working with GPU rendering and render engines, it's like 5 to 10 minutes per image. If you have a still, it's no problem. Usually clients are never that in a hurry. Like 10 minutes is nothing. So it's it used to take a lot longer before the GPU. So yeah, good question, Dino.
Actually, the same question.
No way. You're lying. Okay. Did I answer everything you need? Yeah. Okay. Some more questions? Yeah.
Are you doing a lot of UV and unwrapping basically out of the built-in tools of cinema, or do you use any other?
I don't like doing that at all. Okay, feels better. Yeah, I don't like doing that at all. But when I have to, I actually use Rism UV. I'm not sure if it used to be called Unwrap 3D, something like that. Yeah, it's very simple. But I used to use body paint a lot, also for that.
I think there's still a lot of ways to go to get really on much level of industry, because I think sometimes there are many missing for
Yes, and it is important, really, if you really want to go to the really details. Like for instance, I'm showing you some damage. I'm doing some random textures, and that's very random. If you want something really, like for instance, this cap here, usually is going to get worn out on some edges and not in the middle. If you really go into detail, you can't get that with a texture. So you have to unwrap it and use like a tool for painting masks and substance painter or something, or body paint, and that really adds a lot more details that are necessary. So that's the part I should be doing more, but life is short, and sorry.
So you go mainly with easy shading the whole object when possible.
Yeah, if I don't have to, I cheat. I use dirt maps or ambient occlusions, and even try placing some random textures to place them on to make them look right. But when it comes to the point when it doesn't look good, you just have to unwrap it and paint some custom textures. Okay, more questions? You sure? Do you know?
How much time, let's say until now, how much time of your work was cleaning up the meshes that you got from designers, like architect designers? Because doing all this type of preparation work before you start shading and lighting, how much time did it take for, I mean, right now you can import it into Arc 20 and do it much quicker, but was it like that you had like 20%, 30 or 50% of the time just having to clean up all the mess first, or was it easier for you because people already sent you the stuff much better than I'm thinking right now?
No, it's usually a mess. It really depends on how it was created in the CAD program. So even though we now have like a good importer for CAD in R20 and scale-based tessellation and everything, but if, like, for instance, client is using SolidWorks and did a terrible job of doing grouping things and leaving things that are not in a scene, just hidden from view, and you open it in Cinema 4D, you have a huge mess. So either I ask them politely to clean it up a little bit, or it's going to take me forever to clean it because sometimes you don't really know what's right, what's not, or you just have to do it. Just no way. But scale-based tessellation in R20 is very good. Sometimes you would get like for instance this phone, and you get little screws in there, and they're really high poly, right? And so basically you have to remodel them or start making instances. But now you have a scale-based tessellation, which means small objects are going to be low poly, automatically set to low poly, and big objects are going to be high poly. So this saves a lot of time. So yeah, it's, working with CAD is you almost never really get a complete model that you're just ready to go, unless you have a really good CAD artist that takes care of all the details necessary. But then you usually have problem with because it's too high poly, right? Then you have like a very dense mesh, and you're in trouble again. So, yeah. You mean before R20? I just gotta remember what it's called. Yes, Polytrans. Thanks. Yeah, that one works really well. It works really well. But now this step is no longer necessary. So every CAD I tried, every CAD file I tried in R20 is really good. Is this still on? Thanks. Something else? Somebody else? More questions? Or are you ready for a break, finally? Okay, good. Thanks for listening. Thanks for being here.